So thank you so much for meeting with me today. I love the film. It's fantastic. What I was wondering is what are some of the difficulties of filming in water, just from a logistical standpoint? And were you able to bring anything from Piranha 3D to your experience on Crawl?
Filming in the water is the most difficult thing you can imagine. I mean, like everything you learn or read about Jaws and about how crazy it was, I think it was even worse than that. And I had that experience, exact experience on Piranha, where I thought was like the most difficult thing I ever, being part of. But then I had so much fun seeing people's reaction watching Piranha. I guess I forgot, and when I went back on Crawl, I kind of like remember how difficult. So yes, I thought that Piranha had gave me a head up on the how to make a underwater movie. But the biggest challenge is like, how do you keep a crew, actors, 10 hours a day in the water? How can you manage to keep the energy going? And somehow for that type of story, I think it's bringing like survival condition within the shoot. So in fact, okay, there is no alligators, with them, but the fact that they are in the element, you cannot cheat. They are actually surviving every day, and the protagonists in the movie are just trying to, make it to the end of the day and survive. The actors and the crew and myself, we were like doing this for 40 days, so that was pretty tough.
Yeah, and another thing about this movie is that it's almost in a certain sense your return to just like straight up tension-filled, scary horror. And it's like in Piranha 3D, it's horror kind of infused with comedy. In Horns, it's kind of mystery infused with horror elements. But this is just straight up suspense horror. What was it like to return to that?
I really, like making Horns and Piranha were like more like Horns was a fantasy, a supernatural fable. Piranha was an extravaganza, guilty pleasure, crazy horror comedy. I wanted to go back to high tension. I wanted to go back to The Hills Have Eyes. I wanted to go back to a very suspenseful, driven story. Something that was way more straightforward. And I was reading script and graphic novel and books, trying to find the right story. And I received the Rasmussen's brother draft, Crawl, and I fell in love with the log line. I thought it was so simple, so all the elements, like saving your dad during a hurricane category 5 in a flooded zone infested with alligators. I mean, it's everything I was looking for. And then it was just like the best opportunity to build that kind of ride, that experience. It's the type of movie that would keep you on the edge of your seat, but also it's not like a horror movie for say. It's more like an experience, like a suspenseful experience. And I think the fun comes from the fact that it's so intense that you need that tension release and laugh and you never know if it's going to work. You hope it's going to work. And then when you see an audience in a theater reacting the way they did react in every country that the movie was released, it's just the most like enjoyable thing for a filmmaker. It's like give you like an instant reward of we did something right. And people understood like what was the intention.
Yeah, and another thing about the movie is that it's like it's so intense because it's so brisk, and it's only 87 minutes, which is kind of unheard of nowadays for like a studio movie to be that short length. So is that something you intended to just like make a shorter kind of experience, kind of a movie that isn't very long and just is this one experience?
I wanted to go back to the High Tension vibe. And High Tension was also a very short movie, not many dialogue, and really full of suspense. But I wanted to make it bigger, I wanted to make it stronger, I wanted to, of course, not repeat the same movie, but do something very different. So Crawl was really approached as almost like the blueprint of a roller coaster. And you can create the best roller coaster ever. If the roller coaster is too long, people get, like sick. I mean, so I think there is a sweet spot where you need to reach that balance to keep that intensity for that much time, But if you go further, if the movie was 2 hours and a half, I think people will be very upset.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was in this movie, there's almost like the third build character is a dog in a certain sense in Sugar. And I was wondering, like, what do you think it is about dogs in horror movies that just adds to the suspense, or dogs or just pets in general? Because I've noticed a trend where we see a lot of animals in the film that adds like another layer of suspense to it.
Yeah, I mean, like definitely Sugar is one of the main characters, almost like the third daughter of the family, and the one that didn't leave. Like she's the one that stay with dad and will do anything to save him as well. I think there is I mean, dogs are part of our life, like all the pets that we have, and our movie is about getting as close as we can from an identification of what we're living, and somehow because they're part of the world we're living in, they just help that immersion thing. Like you feel for them because you relate to them as well. There is a weird relationship, especially in America, with dogs and I remember walking on the project about the Shackleton expedition, and there is like a crazy moment where, because they were starving, they had to eat their own dog, and they were eating the dogs as they were crying because they were killing. That was a very problematic scene, because you cannot kill the dog and eat them, but yes, you can, because you're in a crazy survival scenario that's only happened, but that's also the drama because you have to do it, and somehow there is like a limit where, when we were doing like movies like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was still like, I remember The Hills Have Eyes, when one of the dog was dying, it was kind of a big deal, but today it seems like this is the most important character of all.
Yeah. Americans love dogs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing is your movies have such brutal violence, and there are images in your movies that just kind of like stick in my head that are amazing horror images. Like in Piranha 3D, I think of Jerry O'Connell with his legs chewed off. And in this movie, I like the image that came to mind was Officer Pete kind of getting torn apart by the alligator while outside for the overhead shot. What's the key to crafting a really brutal scene of violence in a horror movie?
I'm smiling. I should not be, because I'm going to look like I'm like like a really evil. No, but it's somehow, I don't know why. I'm a very nice person. I'm like not a serial killer at all. But when you write, I'm always like thinking about like what's the worst thing that could happen to you, and somehow to imagine and create awful way of dying become like a almost like a like a training things where when I write or work on the script, those are like the first thing that comes to my mind is like, we need to do like a moment where it's natural, like the alligators are naturally doing this death roll, and the death roll is one of the most gruesome, gnarly way of killing. Basically like a shark will cut you straight and clean. An alligator will just grab you and then will turn his whole body to dismember you like chicken bones. And that's something that we needed to have in the movie. It's like the most scary thing I can think about.
Yeah. And were there any other self-contained horror movies or just movies in general that you drew inspiration from for this project? And I know you worked with Sam Raimi, who previously did Don't Breathe, was a producer on that project. Did he have any input as to crafting a good self-contained movie?
I mean, working with Sam Raimi was like the best thing ever. I mean, Sam is the kind of producer that you dream to have as a filmmaker, someone who's here to really understand and listen to your vision and help you defend it, and get you to that kind of artistic freedom that you need to make it happen. Then like the contained type of movie, for this one there were like two that were really important for me. It's like Cujo is like one of my favorite movie growing up, but it's also like like that whole section of the movie where she's trapped with her son in the car is one of the most scary, suspenseful, drama-driven, character-driven piece of cinema. The same, I think, like the first Alien for me is one of the best. But of course, when we go to talk about Basement and we talk about Crawl Space, like Sam and Evil Dead is some of the best, cellar or ever made.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, I feel like the concept just really lends itself to another installment, another movie. Would that be something you're interested in doing? Whether it's with the same cast or with different characters?
Like it's so sad when a movie is over, and when you spend so much time, and especially this one where it was physically very hard to do, and like when you see the behind the scene in the Blu-ray or online. I mean, it's a really, really strong experience. So when you get to the end of that process, like your mind is like already kind of, oh, what other story we could tell, because you don't want to leave that world. Like there is you always want to go back and do it again, and so yeah, we have a few stories that will be, I think, very interesting sequel.
Perfect. Yeah, and also on the DVD, I love the graphic novel style opening. I thought that was fantastic. Is that another thing you'd like to explore in the future, just real quickly, in filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting because we kind of use everything in the movie, as you can see, like with the exception of 2 scenes that are in the deleted scene. But on the script, they were like that opening scene, that a big opening scene that was a scene that I really like. And there was not, I understand why we didn't shoot it, is because I wanted to be with the characters and just stay with the characters. But to have the opportunity for the Blu-ray to actually have a version of that scene as a graphic novel animated, version was a cool thing. It's like something I would love to do again, on my next project.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.